The day my daughter-in-law said I was forgetting things, I realized she was hoping I would. She said it gently, that's what made it sting. We were standing in my kitchen. The late afternoon sun came in through the thin lace curtains I'd bought 20 years ago, casting that soft yellow glow over the oak cabinets. I was drying a plate. She was leaning against the counter, arms folded, not defensive, just prepared. "Mom," she said in that careful voice people use around fragile glass, "you told me the same story twice yesterday." I looked at her. Madeline always kept her hair neat, parted exactly down the middle, even her concern looked organized. "I did," I asked. She nodded. "About the lake house? And about the check your sister wrote you in 1989, you repeated it almost word for word." Almost word for word. I set the plate down slowly. My hands weren't shaking. I noticed that immediately. They were steady, steadier than hers. "That's because," I said softly, "it happened exactly that way." She gave me a small smile, the kind you give a child insisting the moon is following them home. "I just think," she continued, "maybe it would be good to see a doctor just to make sure everything's okay." Everything's okay? The clock above the stove ticked. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. Outside, a lawn mower started somewhere down the block. I looked at her, and I knew she wasn't worried about my memory. She was worried about what I remembered. Before all of this, my life was simple, quiet. I turned 65 in April. My son Jasper took me out to dinner at a small Italian place downtown. He insisted on ordering for me like he used to when he was 10 and thought he understood menus better than I did. "Mom, you'll love the eggplant," he said, smiling. I watched him across the table, the faint lines around his eyes, the way he tapped his fingers when he was thinking. He still had his father's hands, broad, warm, capable. My husband passed 8 years ago, a heart attack in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday. Since then it had just been me and my routines, morning coffee on the back porch, crossword puzzles, church on Sundays. I kept busy. Jasper and Madeline lived 15 minutes away. They had been married for 12 years. No children. That wasn't for lack of trying, I knew that. I also knew it was a quiet ache neither of them talked about. Madeline was efficient, organized, capable. She worked in finance, numbers, contracts, tidy columns of logic. I admired that about her in the beginning. She used to bring me lemon bars when she first married Jasper. She'd sit at my kitchen table and ask about his childhood. "What was he like at 7? She'd ask, smiling. "Stubborn," I'd say. "Like now." We used to laugh together, but somewhere along the way laughter turned into something else, something thinner, more measured. It started after Jasper lost his job 2 years ago. The company downsized. He said it was temporary. Madeline picked up extra hours. She became quieter. Money does something to a marriage. It changes the temperature of the air. Jasper started coming by more often after that, sometimes alone. We would sit on the porch. He'd stare out at the yard. "She thinks I should apply for positions out of state," he said once, voice low. "And what do you think?" I asked. He shrugged. "I don't want to leave you here by yourself." I remember the exact way he said it. Not dramatic, not heavy, just honest. I told him not to be silly, that I was fine, that mothers don't break that easily. But Madeline had heard about that conversation. I know she had. Because the next Sunday she came over with a folder. She set it on my dining table like it was a casserole dish. "I've been thinking," she began, her voice calm, "about long-term planning." I poured coffee into 3 cups. The steam rose between us. "For Jasper and me," she continued, "but also for you." "For me?" I asked. "Yes, we should talk about assets, future care, power of attorney, just in case." Just in case, the phrase hung in the air like dust. "I'm healthy," I said gently. "Of course," she replied quickly, "but things happen, it's responsible to prepare." I looked at Jasper. He didn't meet my eyes. I signed nothing that day. I told her I'd think about it, and I did think about it. I thought about how quickly she had shifted from lemon bars to legal documents. I thought about how Jasper's name was on my house deed, because his father wanted it that way. "Family stays family," my husband used to say. Madeline knew that too. She knew everything about paperwork. Everything about ownership. Everything about what happens when someone is declared unfit. So when she stood in my kitchen last Tuesday and suggested I might be forgetting things, I understood the shape of her concern. It wasn't medical, it was strategic. That night after they left, I sat at the small desk in my bedroom. The lamp cast a circle of warm light over the old wooden surface. I opened the drawer where I keep important papers. insurance policies, bank statements, the original deed. And a copy of a letter Madeline didn't know I had. I ran my fingers over the envelope. The paper was slightly creased from years of being folded and unfolded. I remembered exactly when I found it, exactly what it said. Exactly how her handwriting slanted to the right when she was nervous. Forgetting things? No, I remembered everything she wanted to erase. And if she thought I was going to quietly fade into confusion while she rewrote history, she didn't know me very well at all. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, not because I had somewhere to be, because when someone questions your mind, sleep doesn't sit comfortably anymore. The house was quiet, too quiet. Even the refrigerator seemed to hum more softly as if it didn't want to disturb my thoughts. I slipped out of bed and padded down the hallway, my feet knowing every creak in the floorboards. I made coffee the way I always do, 2 scoops, a pinch of cinnamon, let it drip slowly. Routine is a kind of proof. It reminds you that you are still yourself. I stood at the kitchen window while the kettle clicked off and watched Mrs. Patterson across the street walk her little white dog. She's 82, moves slow but steady. Every morning at exactly 7:10, I checked the clock. 7:10, I smiled, still sharp, still aware, still here. But Madeline's voice lingered in the back of my mind. You told me the same story twice. I replayed that Sunday in my head carefully. We had been at their house for dinner. I had mentioned the lake house, how Jasper almost drowned at 12 because he insisted he could swim to the dock without a life jacket. I told it once during salad, and again after dessert. I remembered that clearly. But what Madeline didn't say was that Jasper had asked me to repeat it. He had laughed and said, "Mom, tell that story again. I want to hear how dramatic you made it." He said it with a grin. The same grin he wore as a boy when he wanted attention. I repeated it because my son asked me to, not because I forgot. There's a difference. A subtle one, but important. By mid-morning, I decided to go through the mail drawer. The one where bills and notices land before I sort them. I like to keep things organized, always have. Inside, I found something that made my breath slow. A pamphlet. It was folded neatly between a grocery store coupon and a church bulletin. Understanding Early Cognitive Decline. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't mine. I don't pick up medical pamphlets casually. And I knew exactly who had been standing near this drawer on Sunday when I stepped outside to water the plants. Madeline, she must have slipped it in there quietly. Like planting a seed, I sat down at the kitchen table and opened it carefully. Bullet points, warning signs, repeating stories, misplacing items, confusion with finances. I felt something shift inside my chest, not fear, clarity. This wasn't about concern. This was about documentation, if she could establish a pattern. If she could convince Jasper, if she could gently build the narrative that I was declining, then decisions could be made. Signatures could be justified. Control could shift hands without anyone feeling guilty, because it would be for my own good. I folded the pamphlet back exactly as I found it and placed it on the counter. Let her see that I saw it. Let her wonder what I thought. That afternoon, Jasper stopped by alone. He knocked softly. The same way he did when he was a teenager, coming home late and hoping I wouldn't be upset. I opened the door and studied his face. He looked tired. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Hi, sweetheart." He walked in slowly, glancing around like he expected something to be different. I poured him coffee without asking. He sat at the table. For a few minutes, we talked about small things, the weather, the neighbor's new fence. Then he cleared his throat. "Madeline thinks you should maybe talk to someone." There it was. I looked at him steadily. "And what do you think?" He shifted in his seat. "I don't know, you have seemed a little distracted lately." "Distracted how?" He hesitated. "You forgot where you put your purse last week." I smiled softly. "It was in the hall closet." "I told you I put it there." He blinked. "You said you couldn't find it." "Yes," I replied gently, "because you were standing in the doorway talking to me while I was looking. I found it 30 seconds later." He was quiet. I watched something flicker across his face, doubt, but not toward me, toward himself. "Jasper," I said carefully, "do you think I don't know what year it is?" He let out a breath. "No." "Do you think I don't know how much is in my bank account?" "No." "Do you think I forgot that your father added you to the deed when you were 25? His eyes snapped up. Silence filled the room. That was the first moment I saw fear, not loud fear, just a tightening around his jaw. "Why would you bring that up?" he asked. Because, I said evenly, when someone starts questioning my memory, I start reviewing what might be convenient for them if I lost it. He stared at me. Mom, Madeline's just worried. Is she? I asked quietly. He rubbed his hands together. There's just been a lot of stress. Stress, yes, I knew about the stress. 3 months ago I had gone to drop off a casserole and overheard something I was not meant to hear. Madeline was in the living room on the phone. Her voice was tight. No, we can't refinance again, she said sharply. There's no more equity. I froze in the hallway. Equity in what? Their house or something else? I know, she continued, pacing. I'm working on it. Working on it. I had slipped out before she saw me, but I remembered. I always remember. Jasper finished his coffee that afternoon and stood up slowly. Maybe just think about seeing a doctor, he said again, softer this time. I'll think about it, I replied, and I meant it. Because sometimes the best way to expose a lie is to walk straight into it. After he left, I went back to my bedroom desk. I took out the envelope again. The letter inside was dated 4 years ago, the year Jasper's job first became unstable. It had been addressed to someone named Mark. I had found it accidentally. Madeline had come over while Jasper was away on a work trip. She used my printer to scan some documents. Later, after she left, I found one of her pages stuck in the tray. I almost didn't read it, but my name was on it. I can't keep pretending with her, the letter said. Once we get control of the property, things will be easier. Control of the property, not our property, the property, my house. She had written about debts. About needing security. About how Jasper was too emotional to handle it directly. She trusts me, Madeline wrote. That was the sentence that hurt the most. She trusts me. I never confronted her, not then. I told myself maybe it was old, maybe it was stress talking. Maybe she didn't mean it, but now she was building a quiet case. Forgetful mother, concerned daughter-in-law, responsible planning. I sat back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. If she wanted to test my memory, I would let her, and I would remember out loud. The following Sunday, they invited me over again. Dinner. I arrived 5 minutes early as I always do. Madeline opened the door with that polite smile. Come in, Mom. The house smelled like rosemary chicken. Jasper kissed my cheek. We sat down at the table. Midway through dinner, Madeline cleared her throat. I made an appointment, she said lightly, with Dr. Harris, just a simple evaluation Tuesday morning. I took a slow sip of water. You made it already? Yes, I thought it would be easier. For whom? I asked gently. She paused. For everyone. Jasper looked between us. I folded my napkin neatly beside my plate. All right, I said calmly. Let's go. Madeline blinked. You will? Yes. Her eyes flickered just for a second. She didn't expect that because she thought I would resist. She thought resistance would look like confusion. Instead, I gave her cooperation. And cooperation, when you are fully aware, can be a dangerous thing. I smiled softly across the table. I remember Dr. Harris, I added casually. He treated your father's early dementia, didn't he? The fork slipped slightly in her hand. Yes, she said slowly. I remember you telling me how aggressive it became, how hard that was for you. Silence. Jasper looked surprised. I didn't know that, he said. Madeline's face was perfectly composed, but I saw it, the smallest crack. Because memory isn't just recall, it's power, and I had no intention of surrendering mine. The appointment was set for Tuesday at 10 in the morning. Madeline insisted on driving. I'll take the day off, she said, smiling too brightly. It's important. Jasper couldn't come. He had an interview across town. He looked apologetic when he told me. I'll call you after, he said, squeezing my shoulder. I studied his face. There was love there, and confusion, and something else. Pressure. On Tuesday morning I dressed carefully, not because I was trying to impress anyone. Because presentation matters when someone is quietly questioning your competence. I wore my navy blue blouse, the one with the small pearl buttons. I brushed my hair back neatly and applied a touch of lipstick, rose, not red, calm, not dramatic. When Madeline picked me up, her car smelled faintly of new leather and citrus cleaner. You look nice, she said. So do you, I replied. We drove mostly in silence. I watched the trees pass by the window, the same trees I've seen for decades. I named streets in my head as we turned. Oak Ridge, Maple Bend, Harrison Avenue, still sharp, still aware. The clinic lobby was quiet, neutral walls, soft instrumental music, a potted plant drooping slightly near the receptionist's desk. Dr. Harris was in his late 50s, gray at the temples, measured voice. The kind of man who listens more than he speaks. Mrs. Carter, he greeted me warmly. Nice to see you. I remember you, I said gently. You helped Madeline's father. His eyes flickered just briefly. Yes, he said, I did. Madeline sat beside me, legs crossed, hands folded in her lap, concerned daughter-in-law. The evaluation lasted almost an hour. Memory recall, word association, counting backward, drawing shapes. I answered steadily, calmly. When he asked me the date, I gave it. When he asked who the president was, I told him. When he asked me to remember 3 objects, apple, chair, blue, I repeated them back after 15 minutes without hesitation. Madeline watched closely, too closely. When Dr. Harris asked about daily activities, I described my routines: cooking, church, balancing my checkbook, paying utilities online. Have you had difficulty managing finances? He asked. No, I replied evenly. I review my statements every month. Madeline shifted slightly in her seat. And have you ever felt confused about property ownership or legal documents? He continued gently. There it was. I turned my head slowly toward Madeline, then back to him. No, I said, I'm very clear about my property. The room felt smaller for a moment. Dr. Harris nodded, scribbling notes. At the end, he folded his hands. Mrs. Carter, he said kindly, I see no signs of cognitive decline. You're performing very well for your age. Some normal aging memory lapses are common, but nothing concerning. Silence. Madeline forced a small smile. That's good, she said. Dr. Harris looked between us carefully. If there are specific concerns, he added gently, it's always helpful for families to communicate openly. Communicate openly, I almost smiled. On the drive home, Madeline gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual. Well, she said after a while, I guess that's reassuring. Yes, I replied softly, it is. We stopped at a red light. I turned toward her. Madeline, I said calmly, why did you think I was declining? Her jaw tightened slightly. I just noticed little things. Like what? You repeat yourself sometimes. So do you, I said gently. She glanced at me, startled. When you're stressed, I continued evenly, you repeat phrases. We'll figure it out. You say it 3 times in one conversation. She looked back at the road. That's different, is it? The light turned green. She didn't answer. When we reached my house, she turned off the engine but didn't unlock the doors. There's just a lot at stake, she said quietly. At stake? I asked. She exhaled sharply. You wouldn't understand. Try me. Her eyes met mine then, and for the first time the polished composure slipped. We're drowning, she said in a low voice. The market turned. My investments failed. Jasper doesn't know the full extent. I listened. Still, you told him everything was fine, I said. I am handling it, she snapped softly. With what? I asked. Silence. Her gaze drifted toward my house. The house my husband built his life around. The house Jasper grew up in, the house with my name on the deed. And his. Security, she whispered. There it was again. Security, not love, not family, security. I felt something settle inside me, not anger, understanding. You think if I step aside, I said slowly, if I'm declared incapable, decisions become easier. She didn't deny it. I would never hurt you, she said quickly. It would just be practical. Practical, like reorganizing a closet, like transferring funds, like rewriting ownership. You wrote a letter once, I said quietly, her breath caught. To someone named Mark. Her fingers tightened around the steering wheel. I don't know what you're talking about. You said, I continued evenly, once we get control of the property, things will be easier. Her face drained of color. That was years ago, she whispered. But you meant it. Silence. You went through my things, she asked sharply. You left it in my printer. Her shoulders sagged slightly. It was stress, she said. We were desperate, and now. Her eyes filled, not with tears, with calculation. Now we're more desperate. I nodded slowly. And you thought my memory would be the easiest doorway. She looked at me then, really looked at me. You wouldn't lose anything, she insisted. You'd still live here. It would just be structured differently. With whose name leading? I asked softly. She didn't answer because she didn't need to. I opened the car door. Madeline, I said before stepping out, I remember everything. Her voice followed me. Jasper doesn't need to know about the letter. I paused. There it was, the real request, not concern for my health, concern for her position. I closed the door gently and walked toward my house. Inside, the air felt still, familiar, safe. I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at the wood grain my husband once polished himself. I wasn't angry at Madeline. Desperation makes people rationalize dangerous things, but what she underestimated was that I wasn't fading, and I wasn't frightened. I was thinking, carefully. Because if she was willing to quietly build a narrative about my mind, then I needed to build something stronger. Truth doesn't shout. It waits, and I had waited long enough. That night I didn't call Jasper. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. I made soup. There's something steady about chopping carrots, the clean rhythm of knife against board, the scent of onion rising slowly in warm oil. It gives your hands something to do while your mind arranges itself. Madeline had admitted desperation. She hadn't denied the letter, and she hadn't denied what she wanted. Control, but desperation is rarely born overnight. It grows quietly, behind closed doors, in numbers and statements and missed payments. I needed facts, not emotion. The next morning I drove downtown to the bank where I've kept my accounts for 37 years. The same brick building. The same faint smell of paper and carpet cleaner. Mr. Lawson still works there, thinner now, hair almost white, but he remembers my husband. Mrs. Carter, he greeted me warmly. What can I help you with? I'd like a full review of my accounts, I said calmly. And copies of all access permissions. He nodded and began pulling up records. As he printed documents I watched carefully, my checking, my savings, everything intact, no unauthorized withdrawals, no missing funds. But when he handed me the access sheet, my eyes paused. Authorized viewer Jasper Carter. That was expected. Secondary notification, contact Madeline Carter. I looked up. When was this added? I asked. He checked. About 6 months ago. Standard notification listing. She can't withdraw, just receives alerts. Alerts for what? Large transactions, he said gently. Account changes, title shifts. Title shifts. I felt a quiet chill settle along my spine. Was there an inquiry? I asked evenly. About transferring ownership of property? Mr. Lawson hesitated slightly. There was a general consultation, he admitted. Exploring options for long-term planning, nothing executed. When? 2 months ago. 2 months ago. The same month Madeline began mentioning planning more frequently. The same month Jasper stopped looking me directly in the eyes during certain conversations. Thank you, I said softly, gathering the papers. I walked out of the bank with a steady step, still sharp, still aware, still ahead. That afternoon Jasper called. How did it go? He asked. With Dr. Harris? Yeah, he said I'm fine. Silence on the other end. Good, he said, but the relief sounded complicated. Jasper, I asked gently, did you meet with the bank 2 months ago? A pause. Yes, he admitted. Madeline set it up to discuss what? Just options. For what? For the future, he said carefully, in case something happens. Something like what? Another pause. Mom, don't make this a fight. I closed my eyes briefly. I'm not fighting, I said softly. I'm asking. He exhaled. She's scared, he admitted. The investments didn't recover. We're carrying more debt than I realized. There it was, debt. How much? I asked quietly. I don't know exactly. That hurt more than anything, you do know. She handles most of the finances. Of course she does. Jasper, I said gently, did she tell you about the letter? What letter? So she hadn't. My heart ached, not because of betrayal, because of imbalance. He was being managed, shielded, directed. Never mind, I said calmly. No, what letter? He pressed. It was old, I replied. 4 years ago. Silence thickened. Mom, he said slowly, what are you talking about? I could have told him then. I could have shattered everything in one clean moment, but I didn't. Truth needs timing. I think, I said gently, it's better if you come over tonight. He arrived at 7, alone. He looked tired more than usual. I made tea, chamomile, his favorite. We sat at the kitchen table. The envelope lay between us. What's this? He asked. Something your wife wrote. His brow furrowed. To someone named Mark. He opened it slowly. I watched his face as he read. Confusion first, then recognition, then something deeper. She told me she stopped talking to him years ago, he whispered. She may have, I said calmly. That's not the part that concerns me. He kept reading. I can't keep pretending with her once we get control of the property. His voice faded. Silence filled the room. I didn't know, he said finally. I believe you, I replied softly. He looked up at me then, eyes wet but not crying. Why didn't you tell me? Because I hoped stress would pass, and because I didn't want to hurt you. He pressed his fingers against his forehead. She said the bank meeting was just precautionary. Did she tell you she added herself as notification contact? His head snapped up. What? I slid the printed sheet across the table. He stared at it. She said it was standard paperwork. It may be, I said evenly, but standard for whom? He leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking softly. This is my fault, he muttered. No, I said gently, this is pressure. He was quiet for a long time. Finally he asked, what do you want to do? There it was, the question that shifts a story. What do you want to do? Not revenge, not humiliation, clarity. I want transparency, I said calmly. All of it, debts, accounts, conversations. He nodded slowly. She won't like that. I know. That night he left with the letter folded carefully in his jacket pocket. I didn't sleep much, not because I was afraid, because I knew confrontation was coming. The next afternoon, Madeline arrived unannounced. Her face was composed, but her eyes were sharp. You showed him, she said without greeting. Yes, I replied, you had no right. It had my name in it. She stepped inside without invitation. You've just made everything worse, she hissed quietly. For whom? I asked gently. For us. For you, I corrected. She stared at me. You don't understand the pressure, she said. Then explain it, I replied calmly. She laughed once, short and bitter. Fine, we owe nearly $300,000. The number landed heavy. Business losses, she continued. Private investments. I thought I could recover it before Jasper noticed. And you couldn't, no, and you thought securing my house would fix it. It would buy time, she snapped. Stability? At what cost? She didn't answer because she knew. Jasper came home early that day. I could hear their voices through the thin walls of their house when I later called him to check in, raised, fractured, hurt. He called me that evening. She hid loans, he said quietly. Second mortgage attempts, personal credit lines. I closed my eyes and now I asked, I don't know. His voice sounded small. For the first time in years, he sounded like the boy who once nearly drowned at the lake. I felt protective, but not blind. Jasper, I said gently, love doesn't erase accountability. He was silent. I won't let anyone rewrite my mind to solve their debt, I continued calmly. I know, he whispered. That night I stood on my back porch under the soft glow of the porch light. The air smelled faintly of wet grass. I wasn't broken, I wasn't confused, I wasn't fading, I was clear. And clarity can be uncomfortable for those who hoped for something softer. Madeline hadn't expected resistance wrapped in calm. She hadn't expected memory sharpened by patience. But now everything was in the open. Debt, letters, intentions, and soon consequences. The morning after everything came into the open, I did something simple. I changed my will, not out of anger, out of clarity. I called my attorney, Mr. Whitmore, the same man who handled my husband's estate. His voice sounded older now, thinner around the edges, but still precise. I'd like to review my documents, I told him. Of course, Mrs. Carter, he said. Is everything all right? Yes, I replied evenly. Everything is becoming clearer. We met that afternoon in his office downtown, dark wood shelves, framed certificates, the faint smell of old paper and lemon polish. He spread my documents out across the desk. My will, the house deed, the beneficiary designations. Jasper had always been my sole heir, not because I felt obligated, because he was my son, because I trusted him. Trust, that word had changed shape lately. I don't want to remove Jasper, I said calmly, but I want protections. Mr. Whitmore adjusted his glasses. What kind of protections? A trust, I replied, structured, delayed, with oversight. He studied me carefully. Is someone pressuring you? No, I said gently. But someone tried to question my capacity. His eyes sharpened. I see. I explained only what was necessary, the medical evaluation, the financial inquiry, the suggestion that I was forgetting things. Mr. Whitmore leaned back slowly. In cases like that, he said, documentation is everything. I've begun that, I replied. We arranged for my house to be placed into a living trust with very specific conditions. Jasper would inherit fully eventually, but not through transfer under duress, not through reclassification of my mental state, and not while debts hovered over him like a shadow. Any sale of the property would require your written approval and medical certification of sound mind, Mr. Whitmore explained. Good, I said softly. And if someone attempts to challenge your capacity, I'll fight it, I replied calmly. He smiled faintly. I don't doubt that. When I left his office, the air felt different, lighter, not because the situation had improved, because I had anchored myself. That evening, Jasper came over. His shoulders looked heavier than usual. She's furious, he said quietly. I expected that. She says you're humiliating her. I poured tea and handed him a cup. I'm protecting myself, I said gently. If that feels like humiliation, perhaps something is misaligned. He stared at the steam rising from his mug. I didn't know how bad it was, he admitted. The debt, the loans. Do you know now? He nodded. And she wants to consolidate, file restructuring, but she says without assets to secure it, we're limited. Assets again, I held his gaze. My home is not collateral, I said softly. I know, he whispered. The way he said it broke something small inside me, not because he disagreed, because he sounded tired. I don't want you choosing between us, I told him quietly. He looked up quickly. I'm not. Then don't let silence choose for you, he didn't answer. 2 days later, Madeline came to see me again. This time she didn't wait in the car, she rang the bell. I opened the door. She looked thinner, pale around the mouth, controlled but barely. May I come in? She asked. Yes, I said. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. No coffee this time, no polite smiles. I know about the trust, she said flatly. Of course you do. Jasper told me, and you're making this harder than it needs to be. I folded my hands gently. How so? If we could leverage the house? No, she pressed her lips together. You're being stubborn. I'm being careful. She leaned forward slightly. We're married, she said sharply. His stability is my stability, and his stability requires my instability. I asked calmly, that's not what I meant. Then say what you mean. Silence stretched. Finally she spoke. I can't lose everything, she whispered. There it was, not greed, fear, real human fear. What did you risk? I asked gently. She hesitated. Private equity placements. Aggressive ones? With whose knowledge? She didn't answer. Jasper trusted you, I said quietly, and I was trying to grow what we had. She snapped. At what point does growth become gamble? I asked softly. Her eyes flashed. You think you've never made mistakes? I have, I replied, but I didn't hide them behind someone else's memory. That landed. She looked away. For a long moment neither of us spoke. Then she said something I didn't expect. If you don't help, he'll resent you. It wasn't a threat, it was a calculation. I studied her face. He won't, I said calmly. You can't be sure. I know my son. She gave a thin smile. Do you? The question hung there because love can blur judgment, and she knew that. I know him better than you think, I replied quietly. She stood abruptly. You're choosing pride over family. No, I said gently. I'm choosing boundaries. She left without another word. That night Jasper called again. She says you're pushing her into bankruptcy. I'm not pushing, I replied. I'm refusing. He was quiet. I don't know how to fix this, he said. You don't fix it by moving the problem, I answered softly. I feel like I'm failing both of you. You're not responsible for choices you didn't make, I said. Silence. Then, almost as if he were speaking to himself, he whispered, I should have paid more attention. Yes, he should have, but shame isn't medicine. Action is. The following Sunday, something unexpected happened. Madeline's sister called me. Her name is Rachel, younger, blunt. I don't know what's going on, she said, but my sister is spiraling. I listened. She told everyone you're losing your memory, Rachel continued, but then she mentioned Dr. Harris cleared you. I closed my eyes briefly. She's scared, I said. She's reckless, Rachel corrected. Family always sees what spouses miss. She took risks with money that wasn't just hers, Rachel added. This isn't about you, it's about consequences. Consequences, that word felt steady. Later that evening, Jasper showed up again, but this time he wasn't confused. He looked resolved. She hid another loan, he said. I didn't speak. She used our car as collateral. My heart sank slightly. And I told her we're seeing a financial attorney. I nodded slowly. And the house? I asked gently. He looked at me. That's yours, he said firmly. Not leverage. Something warm settled inside me, not victory, relief, not because he chose me over her, because he chose truth over convenience. I don't want you to leave her because of me, I said softly. This isn't about you, he replied. It's about honesty. Honesty, the simplest word, the hardest to maintain. As he left that night, I stood in the doorway and watched him walk to his car. He looked older than 60, but steadier than last week. And I realized something then. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need public humiliation. All I needed was daylight, and daylight had a way of revealing everything without raising its voice. The truth didn't explode. It unfolded, quietly, like paper being opened in a still room. 2 weeks after Jasper told Madeline they were meeting with a financial attorney, the tension between them became visible to everyone. Not loud arguments, not slammed doors, but absence. Jasper stopped attending Sunday dinners at her parents' house. Madeline stopped posting cheerful photos online. The smiles grew thinner. And people noticed. I didn't speak about it publicly. I continued my routines, morning coffee, church on Sunday, grocery store on Wednesdays, but whispers have a way of moving without permission. Mrs. Patterson caught me outside one afternoon as I trimmed my rose bushes. I heard Jasper's been under stress, she said gently. I kept my hands steady on the shears. Marriage can carry weight, I replied calmly. She nodded, satisfied with a neutral answer. Dignity doesn't defend itself loudly, it stands. The real shift came when Jasper invited me to join them at the attorney's office. Not to intervene, to witness. Everything should be transparent, he said over the phone. I could hear exhaustion in his voice. I don't want secrets anymore. The attorney, Ms. Ramirez, was sharp-eyed and direct. Early 40s, efficient, no nonsense. We sat around a clean glass table, papers neatly stacked. Financial statements laid bare, numbers have a brutal honesty. $312,000 in debt, high-interest loans, private investments that never recovered. Second-tier lenders, even I felt the weight of it. Madeline sat rigid beside Jasper. She didn't cry, she didn't argue, she answered questions, but each answer stripped something away. Why didn't you disclose the second line of credit? Ms. Ramirez asked calmly. I thought I could recover before it mattered, Madeline replied quietly. And when it did matter. Silence, Jasper's jaw tightened, and the inquiry about property leverage? The attorney continued. Madeline hesitated. I explored options, she said. Without the property owner's consent? Ms. Ramirez asked evenly. I spoke then. My consent was assumed under cognitive decline. The room went still. Madeline's face flushed slightly. It wasn't like that, she murmured. It was exactly like that, Jasper said quietly. There was no yelling, no drama, just fact. And fact, when spoken calmly, lands heavier than shouting. Ms. Ramirez leaned back. Given the structure of the trust, she said, glancing at me, the property cannot legally be leveraged without explicit capacity confirmation and written approval. Madeline swallowed. So that's it? She asked. It's never it, the attorney replied. It's restructuring, liquidation of certain assets, lifestyle adjustment, possibly bankruptcy protection. The word bankruptcy hovered like smoke. Madeline's shoulders sagged slightly. Public consequence doesn't always mean scandal. Sometimes it means paperwork, accountability, records that cannot be erased. After the meeting, Jasper asked me to wait outside while he spoke to Madeline privately. I stood in the hallway listening to the muffled tone of their voices through the closed door. Not words, just wait. When they emerged, something had shifted. Not reconciliation, recognition. Jasper walked beside me to the parking lot. She knew, he said quietly, every risk. Yes, I replied gently. She kept thinking the next deal would fix the last one. That's how gambling works, I said softly. He flinched at the word. She's not a gambler, he insisted. No, I agreed. She's someone who couldn't tolerate loss. He looked at me sharply. Neither could I added. When your father died, I almost sold this house out of fear. He blinked. You never told me that. Because I didn't. We stood beside his car. Fear makes us imagine collapse before it happens, I continued, but collapse often comes from trying to outrun it. He nodded slowly. What happens now? He asked. Now, I said gently, you live within truth. The community learned bits and pieces over the following month, not because I spoke, because financial strain leaves visible traces. The car was sold, vacations canceled. Their home went on the market quietly. Madeline's parents asked questions. Rachel told them more than Madeline wanted told, and slowly the narrative shifted. Not the mother is forgetting, but the couple is restructuring. That shift mattered because it protected something invisible, my credibility. One afternoon, Madeline's mother called me. Her voice was tight. I didn't know, she said. I believe you, I replied calmly. She's embarrassed. She should be accountable, I answered gently. She says you exposed her. I told the truth, I said, silence, then a softer tone. You could have destroyed her. I looked around my kitchen. The sunlight fell across the table the same way it always had. I didn't want destruction, I said quietly. I wanted clarity. The house listing sign appeared in front of Jasper and Madeline's home 3 weeks later. I drove past it once, slowly, not to gloat, to understand. Their life reduced to square footage and pricing. Loss has a smell. It smells like cardboard boxes and dust from empty shelves. Jasper moved into a small rental apartment temporarily. Madeline moved in with her sister. They weren't divorced. Not yet, but separation hovered between them. The most painful part wasn't the debt, it was the fracture of trust. One evening, Jasper sat across from me at my kitchen table again, just like when he was younger. "She says you never liked her," he said quietly. I smiled faintly. "That's not true. She says you always judged her." "I observed her," I corrected gently. He stared into his cup. "Did you ever hate her?" he asked. "No," I said honestly. "Even after the letter, no." "Why?" I leaned back in my chair. "Because desperation doesn't make someone evil," I said softly. "It makes them short-sighted." He looked at me, eyes tired. "She says you wanted to control everything." I almost laughed but didn't. "If I wanted control," I said calmly, "I would have signed the house over years ago and watched what happened." He absorbed that public consequence had done its work, not by humiliating her, but by revealing structure, bank meetings, attorney consultations, for sale signs, family conversations. No one accused her loudly, but everyone knew the truth, and truth once known changes how people look at you. It changes how they trust you, it changes how you trust yourself. One night, Madeline came to see me again, but this time she didn't look composed. She looked tired. Genuinely tired. "I'm filing for bankruptcy," she said quietly. I nodded. "It's the only way," she continued. "Then do it," I replied gently. She looked at me carefully. "I thought you'd be satisfied." "I'm not your opponent," I said softly. Silence lingered between us. "I was wrong," she admitted. That was the first time she said it, not defensive, not calculated, just true. "I thought I could fix everything before anyone noticed." "And when you could?" I asked gently. "I panicked." She swallowed hard. "I shouldn't have questioned your mind." "No," I agreed calmly. "You shouldn't have." Tears filled her eyes but didn't fall. "I'm sorry." It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it was real. Public consequence had stripped away the strategy. All that remained was accountability, and sometimes that's enough. Bankruptcy is a word that sounds louder than it feels. In reality, it's paperwork, meetings, forms, a slow untangling, but what it untangles most is pride. Over the next few months, life rearranged itself quietly. Jasper's house sold for less than they had hoped. After fees and remaining mortgage balances, there was little left. What remained went toward the structured settlement Ms. Ramirez had negotiated. Madeline filed for Chapter 13, a repayment plan, 5 years of strict budgeting. 5 years. There is something humbling about knowing your future is mapped out in monthly installments. Jasper did not file. His name wasn't tied to most of the private loans. That revelation hurt him almost as much as the debt itself. "She didn't want to burden me," he told me one evening, sitting across from me again. The kitchen clock ticked steadily. "Or she didn't want to be stopped," I replied gently. He didn't argue. They began counseling, not because I insisted, because something had broken that numbers couldn't repair. Trust doesn't return through payment plans. It returns through truth repeated consistently. For a while, Jasper stayed in his small rental apartment. Beige walls, sparse furniture. I visited once. He had hung a single framed photograph, his father holding him on the porch of our house when he was 5. I stood looking at it longer than I meant to. "I keep thinking about what Dad would have done," he said quietly. "He would have protected the house," I replied softly. "And Mom?" he asked, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "She would have protected her mind." He laughed gently. The sound felt like something healing. Madeline called less often. When she did, her tone had changed. No more polished composure. No more strategic softness, just careful words. "I sold my car," she told me one afternoon. "That must have been difficult," I said. "It was necessary." Necessary, a word she used often before, but now it sounded different, less entitled, more grounded. One Sunday she asked if she could come to church with me. That surprised me. "Of course," I said. She sat beside me in the third pew, quiet, no makeup, hands folded. When the pastor spoke about humility, not humiliation, but humility, I felt her shift slightly beside me. Afterward, she didn't speak immediately. We walked slowly to the parking lot. "I don't think I've been humble in a long time," she admitted quietly. "Humility isn't weakness," I said gently. "It's alignment." She nodded. We stood there for a moment in the warm afternoon sun. "I was afraid of losing everything," she said. "And what did you lose?" I asked softly. She thought about that. "Control," she whispered. "Yes," I agreed. Control feels safe until it demands dishonesty. Over time, small things began to repair. Jasper started coming to dinner again, not out of obligation, but comfort. Madeline joined occasionally, not every week, but enough. They weren't the same, but they weren't shattered either. One evening as we sat at the table, Jasper looked at me carefully. "Mom," he said, "I need to ask you something." I set down my fork. "What is it? If something ever does happen, if you ever do need help, will you tell me?" His voice wasn't defensive, it was tender. "Yes," I said softly, "I will, and you won't push me away because of this." I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. "I protected myself," I said, "not from you, from fear." He squeezed my hand. Madeline watched quietly. Later that evening, as she helped me wash dishes, she spoke in a low voice. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said. "Forgiveness isn't a transaction," I replied gently. "I don't deserve it. Deserving isn't the point." She paused, water running over her hands. "Then what is?" "Growth," I said softly. She looked at me then, not defensive, not calculating, just human. "I'm trying," she whispered. "I see that," I replied, and I meant it. Healing isn't dramatic. It's repetition, showing up, admitting fault more than once, living differently. One afternoon, I received a letter from Dr. Harris, a routine follow-up note. "Your cognitive evaluation remains strong. Continue your routines." I smiled as I folded it and placed it in my drawer. Documentation matters, but peace matters more. I still keep the original letter Madeline wrote to Mark, not as a weapon, as a reminder. Memory is not something to be manipulated, it's something to be honored. The following spring, Jasper and Madeline rented a smaller home together. Not grand, not impressive, but stable. I visited for dinner once. The furniture didn't match, the walls were plain, but there was laughter, soft, cautious, real. After dessert, Jasper walked me to my car. "I almost lost everything," he said quietly. "You lost illusions," I corrected gently. He smiled faintly. "And you?" "I lost naivety," I said. We stood there for a moment. "You never tried to hurt her," he said thoughtfully. "No," I replied. "I tried to protect truth." He nodded. "She says you're stronger than she realized." "I'm just clear," I answered softly. That night as I drove home, I thought about the first day she questioned my memory, how small that moment seemed, how strategic, how quiet. And how easily it could have unfolded differently if I had doubted myself. That's the danger. When someone suggests decline softly enough, you begin to examine yourself harder than necessary. You begin to question your own clarity. But I didn't, because I knew something simple: memory is not just recall. It's identity, and no one gets to rewrite yours because they are afraid of their own mistakes. I still sit on my porch in the mornings, coffee in hand, watching Mrs. Patterson walk her dog at 7:10 sharp. The clock still ticks above my stove. The house still smells like cinnamon and old wood. I am 65, not fading, not confused, not erased, just aware, and grateful that truth, when held calmly, doesn't need to shout. It only needs to stand long enough to be seen. So I want to ask you something. If someone you loved began questioning your mind, not out of medical concern, but convenience, would you doubt yourself, or would you stand still long enough to let the truth surface? Aging does not mean disappearing. Growing older does not mean growing powerless. Sometimes it simply means you've lived long enough to recognize manipulation when it whispers. If this story touched you or reminded you of something in your own life, share your thoughts. I read them all. And if you believe in protecting your dignity at any age, stay with me. There are more stories to tell, because as long as we remember who we are, no one gets to rewrite us.